It is time to plant tomatoes, one of my favorite events of the year. And over the years, I've found that my process for doing so is pretty much the same every year. Very little deviation from it. And I've always had good success. So I thought today I would just show you my process from start to finish on day one of planting time for tomatoes. First thing here is this broad fork. Now I love to use this in my raised beds. It serves the purpose of basically creating pathways down further into the soil without tilling or digging. I always try to avoid that, but at the same time, I want some of those organic nutrients, especially the compost, to get down into those areas further below the surface. And so a broad fork like this is the ideal way to do it because you have these nice thick tines that are pretty long and they're very strong, so you can just plunge it down into the soil, and if you have nice loose soil, it's very easy to do that. And then I just rock it back and forth a little bit, and that opens up those pathways, which is very important for a couple reasons. First of all, it provides more opportunity for water and air to get down there to promote the roots and to help them. But secondly, it's very important in step 2 of my process, which is top dressing with compost, because those pathways allow that top dressed compost to get further down into the soil. So right now I'm tapping into my reserve stock of purchased compost. Now I make a lot of my own and I like to use that all the time, but I try to mix it up. And I have really good access to high quality composted soil. The product is called Soil Cubed. It's available in the Southeast. And I love having this on hand, whether I use a big cubic bag all at once or I just keep it around and use it as needed. It's nice to have it and it never goes bad. So I'm working through this bag right now and I'll fill up one of these tub trugs and that will do it, because really good compost, a little bit goes a long way, and I'm only gonna need about a tub full of this. Right behind the broad forking, creating those pathways, I'm coming in and I'm top dressing with some compost. Now this bed is pretty full because my routine twice a year is to do this, and thankfully a little bit does go a long way. It provides really all that I'm looking for here, but it's got a lot of biological activity, so those micronutrients and of course a little bit of NPK, those are the primary nutrients that the plants need. But this is just going in there to infill those pathways and provide a little bit of a boost. It's kind of like a bank account, because when your plants are growing in the bed, they're making a lot of withdrawals of the nutrients and all that beneficial nutrients. But this is making deposits back in to make sure that my soil account doesn't go negative. All right, so that may not look like a lot, but really it's plenty for what I need to do, because again, there's lots of compost already in here, but I like to refresh. And at this stage, once I've top dressed, I'm just smoothing it out over the surface and I'm helping the compost find its way into those pathways. But I don't need to do much, because a lot of the earthworms that are in here will come bring more of this compost down, and it's already nice and loose from plenty of repetition of adding compost and all the good organic matter here. So this is fantastic soil, but the reason it's fantastic is because I continue to do this process twice a year with some really high quality compost, whether it's the compost that I make here or that I purchase separately. All right, now the step in the process that's my favorite, because it's the instant gratification part, and that is planting the tomatoes. But first I want to place them, and I've done this enough, as I've mentioned before, that I know pretty much exactly where they go in the bed. First of all, I look for about 30 inches on center. I have some reference points in the bed as well, so I can kind of look and make sure that they're in the middle and they're evenly spaced. And so I think I've got that dialed in pretty good. But then I'll do kind of a quick eyeball check beforehand, before I dig the holes, that is, and see if I'm happy with that. Close is good enough, even for a perfectionist, but that looks pretty good. Now, of course, you have to have the right tools, and because this soil is so loose, I just use my soil knife, and I just create a big hole with a knife, and I place them in. And you're gonna see this process right now, because that's what I'm doing, and I always like to plant deep with tomatoes. All those white fibers are called adventitious roots, and those will form actual roots once they're beneath the soil. So by planting it deep, that creates better opportunity for more roots to take up more water and nutrients. And that's why I want to go at least that deep. I might even take this off once I see how deep I can dig this hole, because the deeper the better when it comes to tomatoes. So here's my soil knife. There's my mark where I had the staging of the container. And now I'll just kind of knife down into the hole. See how loose that is? And that's the kind of soil you want for really anything you're growing, especially edibles. But now, because the soil's backfilling in, I'm just going to move my hand down in there and dig it a little bit deeper. And then I'll go ahead and place this into the hole. And if it's as deep as I want it, that's good enough. Now those roots look great. I still like to kind of just break up the pattern, because right now they're, kind of slightly bound together, but by just teasing them apart just a little bit, liberating the roots, that's going to help them expand once they get down into that soil. So that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that right there. I don't really need to do anything else. I think I'm going to cut this branch off once I get it in. But I just backfill. I don't press it down. I let the water do that, which will be the next step. I am going to cut this off because I don't want the leaves to be too close to the soil surface, because even with mulch, which will be a step coming up that helps keep the pathogens in the soil, there are diseases in the soil that can make their way up onto foliage during rain events or overhead watering. So the further away the lowest leaves are from the soil surface, the better chance you have of mitigating or reducing the risk of those diseases coming up. All right, so I like to always water just at the base of the plant, never wetting the foliage whenever possible. Now, of course, in a rain event, you can't prevent that, but when you're watering, you can definitely keep it right at the surface. Now, some people like to make an island around the base, which is fine. That keeps the water focused right around the roots. But I just have enough confidence in this soil that the way that I water, it's going to find the roots no matter what. The other thing is, because this soil drains so well, it's hard to overwater it. So I could stand here for a long time doing this, and I'd never overwater this plant. And again, that's because of the good drainage of the soil. Another reason why adding compost and other organic matter is really good, because that improves the drainage and airflow into the soil. Now, my favorite mulch is just rotted leaves that I've collected. I collect just as much as I need and no more for my beds. And this is what it looks like after it's been sitting around for about 6 months from the fall. And so I just spread this around the plant. Ultimately, I'm going to spread it around the entire bed, but just in the interest of time today, I want to mainly get it around the roots and underneath the foliage. Again, the mulch does many things, but for today's conversation, the two most important things it's doing is helping to retain the moisture in the soil by reducing the evaporative effects of all the sun beating down on the surface and crusting it over, but at the same time drying out the soil. We don't want that. We want to keep that moisture in there as long as possible. So this is a protective barrier, essentially, for that purpose. And the other thing that mulch does is it provides a barrier from pathogens that are in the soil. I mean, there are diseases that overwinter and live in the soil that can infect your plants by splashing up onto the foliage. But when you have a layer of mulch over the soil and underneath the foliage, that's kind of like a blanket or something that's preventing the potential for those pathogens to make their way onto the foliage. So that's another of many benefits that mulch provides.